our game studios? hell is this place? How did I get here?
It's my sincerest belief that we can go on living. It really makes you think about what it means to be human.
I mean, if we are able to save even just a small piece of ourselves, why wouldn't we do that?
My name is Simon. Do you know anything about this place?
Oh, you knew. Look, I'm obviously hurt. Blacked out pretty bad. Can't remember how I got here.
What do you remember then?
I was in the pilot seat, dealing with some heat shields, and that's my last clear memory.
What the hell? How is this possible? Are you human?
PlayStation.
As much as it paints a very reductive portrayal of the mentally ill, I feel kinda sorry for Mad Max. It's such good video game adaptation material. Christ knows why it's been fucking around with movies for so long. Movies are all like, ooh look, a little film about S&M perverts driving around a desert and blowing each other up. Well, the Academy need look no further for the best dramatic screenplay candidate. Meanwhile, video games are all like, S&M perverts driving around and blowing each other up? Where the fuck do I sign? Along your cock using my saliva instead of ink? Can do. So Mad Max, or as it's called in its native land, mid-mix, finally rolls into video game town, disregarding the Mad Max game on the NES, which doesn't count for a whole lot because fucking Wayne's World had a game on the NES, only to find that the industry is way ahead of it and we've already played what might as well have been the Mad Max video game about 17 times already by my count, between Borderlands, Rage, Carmageddon, the entire Fallout franchise and to a lesser extent Mario Kart. In a post-apocalyptic Australian outback whose population has a slightly bafflingly large percentage of people with American accents, Max Rokotansky is doing what he's always doing at the start of Mad Max stories, that is to say bugger all, drifting about squinting into the middle distance until he falls foul of this week's roaming gang of S&M murderers who will in some way fuck him over so he can mad all over them. Sure enough, one comes along and Max battles them in an overlong intro cinematic with a textbook case of why the fuck didn't they make this a playable prologue before losing his car and his jumper and being left for dead in the desert. Shortly, the other thing that always happens in Mad Max stories happens. He stumbles upon an insane person and teams up with them, although he tries his damnedest not to. Mad Max's personality I would rate a 0.7 on the Kratos scale of anti-hero so riddled with generic anger it works against their own best interests. He's filled with naked indignation whenever a character has the balls to be in his presence without bashing their heads in on the floor amid a stream of progressively slurred apologies. But who cares if the protagonist's personality is more repellent than a cast iron toilet brush as long as he has a relatable goal? Max sets out on an epic quest to... Actually, what the hell are we doing here? Well, we're antagonizing the local warlord, but that's more of a hobby thing. That's what Max does when there's no Games Workshop nearby where he can buy new paints for his Warhammer miniatures. No, that's just in aid of his main, if you'll pardon the pun, driving motivation, which is to make his car really nice. But you can be halfway through the game and driving a spiky death metal monster that fires rockets and plays ice cream van music, and the game just keeps trundling along, shrugging its shoulders as to where the hell it's going. It's a sandbox in almost the most literal sense, in that you explore a whole bunch of sand and do a lot of bare-knuckle boxing. But it's the kind of sandbox where you're getting more of your money's worth in the side activities. If you only follow the critical path, you'll play the story of a man who shows up at friendly camps, promises them the earth, and then fucks off to the next one, like a wasteland Jehovah's Witness. But Mad Max isn't just a sandbox game, it's the sandbox game. That is, the thing that every sandbox game is now. You look for collectible caches of in-game currency, you go to some kind of observation tower thing that reveals all the in-game currency in the near vicinity, you bring down enemy strongholds to reduce threat and acquire more in-game currency, and then you spend it all on upgrades to make it easier to get in-game currency. In this case, it's scrap, which Max can use to upgrade his car and himself, for life is hard in the wasteland, and the only way to learn new fighting techniques is to eat large quantities of jagged rusty metal. It made me think of Shadow of Mordor a little bit, and that in turn made me think, that's right, my brain can think about a whole two things, you jelly, that the sandbox game has now become what the third-person shooter was not too long ago, the default setting that tends to get rolled out for generic action games after the creative team have sat around a blank whiteboard all morning and have started hankering for an early lunch. Not that there's anything wrong with the default game, it's a staple like bread, but without butter and or luncheon meat, bread by itself's fit only for pigeons. Remember Kane and Lynch 2? I've been trying not to over the years with the able assistance of Dr. Bleach. Putting aside the horrible camera effects and sweaty old man buttocks, it was shit because the gameplay had nothing besides the default third-person shooting. It was just bread and buttocks. The default game lives and dies on a unique selling point, like Shadow of Mordor's little black book of orcs. So what is Mad Max's USP? Well, there's cars. Cars in a sandbox game? Shut your mouth. That would be like putting Bulgarian women in the Bulgarian women's national handball team. Car combat, I should say. As you drive around, you frequently run into convoys of enemy vehicles on some errand or another that isn't so important and they can't take time out to hound you remorselessly to your death, but that was more an annoyance than an impromptu breakout of wacky racist fun times when you're trying to reach the next observation balloon and someone's grill is trying to French kiss your exhaust pipe. I eventually found it much more efficient to get out of my car and stand next to a big wall, then watch the little cogwheels turn in the heads of the enemy drivers until they realise they can't ram me without totaling their vehicle, and now have to get out for some of that now standard punch counter combat that I'm betting the Arkham Asylum people really wish they'd patented. Right, now let's get to that observation balloon so in future I can fast travel past all this bullshit. What was that? Says the game. Please call down a massive dust storm. Well, since you insist. I never figured out what the fuck I was supposed to do in dust storms. If I'm supposed to wait for it to pass, then it takes way too fucking long, because I always gave up and went back to the nearest friendly outpost. I try to use the observation thingy regardless, but for some stupid reason the game doesn't think it's a good idea to fly hot air balloons in howling gales of jagged metal, so Mad Max is a resounding meh. It's got a perfectly adequate if occasionally buggy sandbox setup, but the only USP seems to be the fact that it fucks you about on your way to places, which is precisely the same USP as the Birmingham one-way system.
Why did I move here? I guess it was the weather. Or I don't know, that thing, that magic. You see it in the movies. I wanted to retire from what I was doing, you know? From that line of work. Be a good guy for once, a family man. So, I bought a big house. Came here, put my feet up, and thought I'd be a dad like all the other dads. My kids would be like the kids on TV. We'd play ball and sit in the sun, but, well, you know how it is.
Welcome, soldier. You're about to jump into a galaxy of opportunity, wealth, destruction, and death. If you are adequately prepared, you are far less likely to die violently on the battlefield. Your war begins long before the first shot is fired. The equipment you choose, including your dropsuit, weapons, and vehicles, will determine not only your odds of survival, but also your role on the battlefield. This equipment must be purchased from the marketplace and will not be returned to you should you lose consciousness or life in battle. Your clone continually accrues skill points in battle and out. In turn, these points are applied to skills to increase their effectiveness or to teach you how to use more advanced gear. The skills you train will define the warrior you ultimately become. Your Neocom is as important a tool as any weapon you will ever wield on the battlefield. It provides remote access to the market, allows you to customize combat fittings, plan your skill progress, communicate with other mercenaries, and most importantly, tracks all ongoing ground combat in the cluster. Your mercenary status allows you to fight for the corporations or factions of your choice. Once committed to a battle, you will join your allies in an orbiting war barge to suit up, form squads, compare gear, and devise strategies for the battle ahead. Remember that communication extends beyond the mercs around you. You can discuss tactics both in a local chat and within your corporation, and even with starship pilots in EVE Online. Combat in New Eden is fast, frantic, and brutal. As good as you are, you will die. And when you do, you will reawaken in a clone ready to return to battle, wiser and better prepared for the challenges ahead. Whether sneaking past enemy positions, plowing through them in a tank, or supporting your squad, you must adapt to a dynamic and dangerous battlefield. Tactical objectives change with every battle. You might need to clear out drone infestations or participate in massive land grabs sponsored by galactic empires. You may find yourself fighting wars for ideals, for money, or simply because it's what you're good at. Along the way, you'll meet like-minded mercs and forge alliances. Because one day, the land you're fighting for could be your own. Your teammates don't need to be your best friends, but you will need to trust them and work together as a unit. Being in the same squad will improve your combat effectiveness, and having a starship pilot join you can provide substantial benefits, including orbital strikes on your enemies. Dust 514 is more than a chance to lay down blistering fire, rush over terrain in armored vehicles, and fight across the galaxy alongside your fellow mercs. Every battle, every action, every decision you make will bring the galaxy together or tear it apart.